Hey guys, this is Kevin. Welcome back to Midwest Woodcraft. Today, in the latest installment of our trapping series, we're going to go over trail snares. Now, a few things I want to say about snares are, in most states they are illegal. In this state they are. So we're just out here practicing. These aren't something that we're going to actively use. So make sure when you're out there practicing your snares and your traps, I said it before, make sure you're taking them down when you leave. You're not leaving them set up or leaving them baited or anything like that. We don't want to get in trouble while we're out playing around in the woods. So with all that being said, there's a lot of things you can do with these snares, guys. You can target a wide range of different sizes of animals, everything from squirrels to deer. Today we're going to be focused more on the smaller animals like squirrels, rabbits, and such. But it can be used on a lot of different types of animals. Now, you can set these up in a lot of different ways. There are drag snares where you actually attach your snare to something heavy. If you're in an area where you're not able to secure the snare for some reason or another, you can tie it to a log, a rock, something like that, and the animal may be able to drag it for a ways, but in theory it should get tangled up in brush or tire the animal out, and you should find it right there in that immediate area. You could do a baited box type snare where you would stick sticks into the ground in kind of a box shape, have your snare set up in the opening of that, bait the inside, make sure you leave plenty of room for your snare to get caught on the animal before they get to the bait, and as they go in there to try to get that bait, they're going to get tangled up in your snare and hopefully be waiting for you there. There's spring pole snares, all kinds of different things you can do with these guys. We're going to go over a couple different easy ways to set them up here. Stay with me and I'll be back with you here in a minute. Alright guys, so if you can see through the mosquitoes there, I'm going to show you how I do these snare loops. Now this isn't anything I've made up or anything new. This is just from what I've seen and what I've read, looks like about the best way to do it. And this is going to be a locking snare. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our wire, hopefully you can see that, it's not very thick, and I have a small piece of twig here. What I'm going to do is take that wire and run it around that stick 2 times. I want to make sure I leave plenty of tag here to go around. My big clumsy fingers are going to get in the way here. We go around that twice. Try to keep them kind of neat, that coil kind of neat as you go through. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to twist that stick, use up all that tag, and we're going to break that twig off, and we have our loop. And what we have there is, hopefully you can see that, is we have a loop and then a secondary locking loop. So what's going to happen when you take your wire through your loop to make your actual snare noose here. I'm going to call this the noose, call this the loop. It's kind of confusing. And of course you're going to want this a little bit straighter and everything, but you can see there. And then having that loop bigger than your wire allows it to freely move up and down this snare loop here, this noose, excuse me. So what we want is, and what I've learned from way more experienced people than me, so I just take their word for it, but it makes a lot of sense. They like to, especially on hanging snares, like trail snares and things, they like to have it hanging from the top here. That way this loop here is on the top of the noose, and that way when an animal comes in, it starts to fall on them. And makes a lot of sense, kind of uses gravity to your advantage, although this wire is stiff and it's going to hold it up. You know, when they come through there, it's naturally going to want to go down, and that's only going to help you a little bit. And then with this locking loop, let me get a little bit closer and I'll show you. Hopefully you can see that there with this locking loop here, right here. As the animal puts tension on this wire, that secondary loop's going to close down on here, and that's going to make it harder to back this off, and it's actually going to lock that snare in place, so it's a lot less chance of them being able to escape. hopefully you can see the squirrel snare there. I'm just using a 24 gauge stainless wire for that, real soft, flexible stuff, easy to work with. Now you may have seen before I drove that post stick in, I kind of stomped the ground down with the heel of my boot just to kind of compact the ground down a little bit. That way whenever I drove that post in there, it didn't go anywhere. Worked out pretty good. So you may have seen where I drove the stick on the opposite side of the snare from the post stick, and that's just to kind of create a little doorway or gateway, whatever you want to call it, a little gap in between all my garbage that I piled up here. And this is going to kind of funnel the squirrel into that area. Now I know the squirrels are very, very active in this area. I've seen them myself, so pretty good chance a squirrel is going to pass under here at one time or another. You can see there's a little game trail leading up to here, and I just kind of utilize that and kind of utilize this log. I like that because very little chance a deer or anything bigger like that's going to come through here and malfunction your trap. So hopefully you can hear me over here. I came around to this other side so you can better see what's going on. So hopefully this animal is going to get snared no matter which way it approaches this trap. If it comes in from this way, it should get snared. If it comes in from this front side, it should get snared. So what we want is, you can see how my snare loop, not my snare loop, but my eye here, where my wire goes back through, is sitting on top. And that's so, hopefully, whenever the animal comes through here, as soon as they touch this, it's going to start going down on them. So as soon as that animal starts walking through here, it's going to start closing in on him, and then you're going to get him snared in there. You can see that post stick's not going anywhere. A squirrel's not going to pull that off, and this wire is plenty strong to hold a squirrel. You can see that locking loop on there is locked on the stick. Hopefully you can see anyway. That loop is locked on the stick, so it's not wanting to back off there. A couple quick things about that setup we just went over. Now, to a novice like us, our chance of success with snares isn't really high. Of course, your chances go up with the more experience you have, the better you are at constructing your snares and finding the proper locations to set them. Now, that being said, a novice like us, we're probably not going to have a high success rate. So, what we're going to want to do is set up a lot of different snares. One snare under a log isn't going to do it. We're going to want to go around, find a lot of locations that we think are good. You're going to be looking for animal sign, you're going to be looking for scat, tracks, food sources, water sources, things like that. These are where the animals are going to be, around, just like people. Civilization's around water. It's where the food is. Animals are the same way. They're going to be near them food sources, near them water sources. So be looking for those areas. And the same way with the deadfalls we've covered in earlier videos. I don't know if I ever really went over that, but the same way with those, you're going to want to set up more than one. You're going to want to set up as many of them traps as you can. So that's why I kind of wanted to mention with my overkill block job on the sides of the snare here, you might not want to spend that much time. Of course, I didn't take much time because everything's just I'm in a kind of a flood area. It floods here certain times of the year, so there's just a lot of stuff laying around. It only took me a few minutes to gather that stuff up and toss it on the ground. But if you're in an area, where you don't have all the materials handy, you're going to maybe want to find a more efficient way to block that off. So that was just kind of a thought I had after looking at it. You might not want to take so much time to set up one trap, because we're going to want to set up as many as we possibly can. So I've made my way into kind of an open meadow here, really grassy area. I happen to know this area has a high concentration of eastern cottontail, so this is where I'm going to be looking to set something up. What I'm looking for is the beats, where as the rabbit hops, when it hops from one point to another, it leaves a little padded down area in the grass, and a lot of times the rabbits will follow behind them and use them same beats. I did happen to notice over here by where I got my little stick drove, it looks like that's what we have over here. We have a little spot there, a little spot there, a little spot there, a little spot there. So it looks like they've been kind of hopping up this way or down from that way, one or the other. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our snare up on one of these beats. Well, researching these snares, I noticed there was a lot of controversy as far as noose size, the height of which your noose should be up off the ground, things like that. So I got to studying around quite a bit and was studying the work of some guys that seem to have quite a bit of success. And what I learned from them was that they like to set their snare loop about 6.5 inches off the ground, and they actually make their snare about a 7-inch tall loop, about 5.5 inches wide. So it's a little bit bigger than what I would have thought, but they say the reason for that, especially for these beats, setting them on these beats, is as they hop, when they're not in distress, they just hop. You know, when a rabbit's distressed, it runs real fast. When it's not in distress, it just kind of hops around. They say when they hop onto them beats, if you don't have your snare loop set high enough, your snare noose, excuse me, set high enough, it won't go around the bottom of their head. So I'm just going to go with that today, and we'll just let the controversy continue. Okay guys, my apologies if this is kind of hard to see. So what we've done here is we've sat this snare up at either the beginning or the end of the beat, whichever way it works. So what's going to happen there is if the rabbit comes from this way, lands here, and then goes to take off, hopefully it's going to get ensnared. If it's coming from this direction, as it goes to leap into this beat, hopefully it gets ensnared. So hopefully you can get it from one way or the other. If it lands here and then goes to jump to take off, or if it jumps from here and goes to land, you're going to catch it. Another great place to set these snares is in fence lines. These old wire fences, they get these little spots down below. You can see how the grass is growing up in the bottom of the fence. Well, you can pretty easily tell if there's a path. We have one right up here, a real good one, perfect example. You see a little path going through the grass there. Now this one's a good one because it's funneled off pretty good. Looks like they've been coming through that one section of fence. So I'll just set my snare right above that. Hopefully you can see our little rabbit snare there. You probably can't because it's pretty camouflage here, which is actually good, but not for this case. But what we have here is this cattle fence, and it's got little rectangles in it. And there was two here that they possibly could have been the lower one, and then the second one up were the two that they possibly could have been traveling. So what I done was I shoved a bunch of stuff in that bottom one so they can't access that. They have to hop through this one. And that's where I set my snare loop. So hopefully the rabbit comes jumping through this loop, it's going to get caught in our snare. Of course, it's tied off to the fence here, and hopefully they'll be there waiting for us when we get back. I want to thank you all for tuning in to Midwest Woodcraft. It was a beautiful day out here practicing some snares. Admittedly, I could use a little bit more practice, not something I'm real experienced with. I've been kind of leaning on some other people that have a lot more experience than I do to kind of teach me these things. But that's what this is all about, getting out and trying some things, practicing some new stuff. Hopefully, if nothing else, you learned a little bit like I did, and it'll give you the motivation to go out and try some of these yourself. So, guys, this is Kevin. Thanks for watching.